Are Forsaken of Tzeentch any good? I believe that they are, but they're also kind of a weird unit, so I'm going to go over this carefully. Forsaken of Tzeentch are much more expensive than your basic Marauder units, and they're available around the same time that you get the basic Marauders, meaning that for the same Tier 2 advanced infantry building, you're instantly able to get Forsaken. However, they'll cost you a lot more favor from Tzeentch. Their upkeep cost will strike you as very stiff for what you're getting, which is a unit of advanced melee infantry, but it's still melee infantry. Forsaken of Tzeentch also don't have any special attack versus large, and they are also not armor-piercing. They do plenty of damage against normal targets. It's just that the damage is lopsided towards general damage and not armor-piercing per se. Forsaken also have Frenzy, so that really helps you to get the attack stat up. But defensively, their melee defense is just not very good. They have 85 armor base, which is pretty beefy, but if something is armor-piercing, even just red-crested skinks, they're going to do a lot of damage back. So what this amounts to is basically a heavy fanatic unit. You have an armored unit that attacks fanatically, that can break, but which isn't going to do so cheaply or easily. So at this point you may be asking, what's the catch? Besides the cost, the catch is that they attack slowly. Their melee attack interval is unusually high for an infantry unit. So even though that they count as infantry, even though they count as small units, man-sized units, and you may be laughing when you look at the models and say, that's man-sized, well, technically, yeah, I mean, they're considered quote-unquote men. They're considered quote-unquote mortals, because they don't disintegrate like demons do. So the bottom line is that they have a thick jaw, but the jaw is on the brittle side. If you have the right stuff to do damage to these units, they will break and rout. So that's the danger that you have when you're using. For all this, they are one of your more reliable options against many kinds of infantry in the early to mid game. And they are one of your best units for simply going in against a bunch of spearmen and mulching them. Their high attack power, paired with the lower attack power of the anti-large units against units that are also man-sized, quote-unquote, means that they have a natural advantage and will simply outpunch the opposition. However, the real fun begins once you get into the later game and get some text from Kairos' tech tree. For a Kairos campaign, Forsaken are one of his original units. They're not part of the Warriors of Chaos expansion, so he has some text for them. What these texts provide is better casualty replacement, which is very hard to get in the Tzeentch roster for Kairos. And in addition to that, you get spell resistance 40%, which means that if you dump a spell on top of their heads, they will take less damage. Now, because they're armored, some things will do minimal damage to them when combined with the spell resistance, but an Infernal Gateway dropped right on top of them will really damage them. But if you're doing that, you're probably doing it on enemy units that are much, much more valuable to the enemy than the Forsaken are to you. So you may just have to suck it up. In the end, Forsaken are a weird unit in campaign because they are essentially heavy chaff with fanatical impact, and they do a lot of damage, but they can also rout and flee rather than disintegrate. So it's very interesting, but the bottom line is, use them before you lose. Don't wait for better units. If you need a heavy infantry unit in the here and now, then you want Forsaken, because you can always merge or dismiss them later. One last thing. Early on, you don't have much in the way of actual cavalry on the ground. And in sieges, your infantry, if it's pretty slow like Chosen or like Chaos Warriors, they're really not very good at capturing victory points. But if you send a few Forsaken on a mad flank, you can get those victory points much faster, except if you had lots of cavalry to spare, but you probably don't. So Forsaken are just much easier to get for high foot speed and being able to do those crazy flanks and not being interrupted by a slower enemy.